Hello, morning, good morning. It's nice and early, just arrived at my office and I had a brainwave as I was in the shower. I get all my great ideas in the shower, and the brainwave was to make a video called, well, have I gone soft? Of course I've gone soft. I'm not 19, but the question is, was I ever hard? You know what I mean? And how soft have I become? So to answer the first question, have I gone soft? No, I haven't got soft. If I had bought a large caravan and was towing it behind me and was sticking to the main roads, then yes. I may not have gone soft, but as I said in a previous video, the building of the Dream Tourer was a journey for me personally. And at the end of it all, I learned something extremely valuable, and I'd like to share that with you now. The clips you've been watching are thoughts that started in April 2019. It's now January 2021. And I haven't changed as a result of building something, far more comfortable than the Troopcarrier. What has changed are some of my rituals. Like this, for example. A ritual of mine used to be spending a good 5 minutes in the evening stoking up a small Coleman kerosene lantern. I loved the thing. It was troublesome. It was a pain. You had to get the little primus pricker out and prick the jet, and I would get this burner, this light that made more noise than that inverter just to get a light. Now I use a little LED lantern. I had one in my pocket. It's not here now. I use an LED lantern because I can charge them on USB and not have to get smelly pouring in kerosene. I don't necessarily miss the ritual of stoking up my kerosene lantern, but my rituals have changed. And now my new ritual is nice coffee in the morning. It's not soft. I've matured. My first vehicle that I did touring with was my first Range Rover. And let me think what I had in the back of it. Namibia, 1984. I had a black box. And I kept the black box for over a decade. I made it myself. Couldn't find anything in the store, so I actually made it out of plywood and aluminium. I wonder if I've got a photograph of it. I bet you I have somewhere. And that box contained all our food. It was actually far too big, because once loaded, it was very, very heavy to get back in the vehicle. We had a cool box, a very rudimentary cool box. It was probably made of polystyrene. We used cardboard boxes, which halfway through a trip they would have disintegrated. We ate tinned food, no fresh vegetables. I mean, fresh vegetables would last a day. We would buy it and kind of eat it that evening. Maybe a little bit for the following lunch, but they would be stone dead. We would carry ice bricks, but occasionally we would put in the effort of wrapping the ice bricks in newspaper and all of the components in newspaper in the cool box, and then sealing it with gaffer tape, and that would last about 3 or 4 days. If it had been a high quality cool box, it probably would have lasted a week. That's what we did, but even that wasn't the ultimate rough camping experience. And if I think about it, that was when 3 of my mates and me went on a boat, a rowing boat with a little seagull outboard, and we did 6 days and nights on something called the Vaal Dam. Now, those of you who live in South Africa will know, I'm sure. a large reservoir, not particularly far from Johannesburg, where I lived at the time. And it was a very large area of water, but the route that we took, it had thousands of kilometers of wetted shoreline. And we slept on the boat. And I remember one night we had a storm, and we had to find shelter. We had to do something. We had no tent or anything. So we actually rolled the boat kind of semi-upside down and then slept underneath the boat for protection. That was probably about as rough as it got. I never had to sleep in a tree or anything like that because of wild animals or whatever, but that was probably the roughest it got. The first time in a vehicle, my own vehicle, my father's vehicle, we had a big tent, but we slept on the ground on thin mattresses. And no fridge, tinned food. Good fridges were not available. I mean, the first angle that ever came to South Africa was probably in 1995-ish. You had them in Australia for a good 5 years before we got them in South Africa. So you had it good long before we did. A fridge is a fundamental, it's fundamental to comfort when camping. And you and I take it for granted. The first time things got a little bit on the luxurious side was my first Land Cruiser, and it was a double cab, and I equipped the back. But again, we slept in ground tents. Now, I've actually gone off rooftop tents a bit, to be honest with you.
Good morning. We slept really, really well.
Because they're actually quite cramped. They are easy to pack up and easy to close. That's nice to have that convenience. But some of them, the traditional ones that kind of open like this, they're not difficult they're not easy to pitch, and they're certainly not easy to pack away. They're far more difficult to pack away than say a bow tent, something like a bow tent that we used in Botswana and Zimbabwe last year. So Jeremy slept on the rooftop tent. He had the ease of just popping it open. We used ground tents because they're easier to use than a traditional rooftop tent, in my view. Apart from if you get very, very stony, lumpy ground, then it is a bit difficult to find a place to camp, to set a ground tent. But then again, you've got to level the vehicle, so it's pros and cons each way. But the first time a roof tent became a really practical solution was in 2009. My second crossing of the Kalahari. The first one in 2008 had failed, but I carried no tent with me at all, apart from this little pup tent which I never used, because I would just roll out my bedroll on the roof rack and sleep on the roof rack in the open.
It's 6:30, peaceful night. I'm woken by the...
Even when there were lots of wild animals around, and I absolutely loved it. It was one of the thrills of my life to be woken up with lions lying on a roof rack. And
the lions moved off. The next time I actually heard a call, I was drifting off to sleep, and I heard the last call, and it in fact had moved 180 degrees and had moved off some distance.
And the second, my second trip, I didn't even have a roof rack on that vehicle. I slept inside the car, which wasn't nearly as nice. But if when the wind gets blowing and you're out in the open, you have no protection, and it becomes actually quite unpleasant. And then 2010, when I was trying to find found the source of the Okavango River, which was a trip through Namibia, a solo trip right through across the Namib, meeting people going into Angola and finding the source of the Okavango. And that was a TV series, a 13-part TV series that I produced. And that particular series has been broadcast on television in about 5 or 6 countries. Very, very successful, and it was one of my greatest trips. But that was the first time ever that my traveling companions in other vehicles that had different types of rooftop tents, some had ground tents, some even had the Oz tent, which makes a beautiful instant tent. Even they would look at me with envious eyes in the morning, as I would. It would serve me so well because I would be filming, and I would have no time to pack up my own little space, because they'd be ready to leave and I'd still be filming. But I would be able to pack up so quickly. And the tent was made by African Outback. It's no longer made. And it was one of the first of the solid aluminium enclosed rooftop tents. And that was, and that spoiled me for an amazing experience with being comfortable, actually being comfortable, and not having to put a lot of effort into getting a tent, getting comfortable. Far less than one would even with a good rear bedroll and a ground tent. Far less. From there, that rooftop tent kind of spoiled me, because it was in that vehicle, driving on that particular expedition, on the early part of that particular expedition, that I realized that if I could, and I was in a riverbed, and you've probably seen this before, and I was thinking about, I'd been on the road, or solo crossing the Namib, and I had been on the road for a good 4 days, 5 days or so. Hadn't had a shower, hardly seen anybody, and I was feeling very, very grubby. And you have body washes and things like that, but there's nothing like a good shower, a proper shower. And that was when I came up with the concept of the Hercules roof conversion, which eventually was made by Alucab, and which I have on my Troopcarrier now. Every time I do one of these trips, I learn something new. I'm sure we all do when we go on them. And nothing special about that. The only difference is that I write it down and make TV shows about it and things like that. It really is the only difference. And around the campfire, on many, many trips that I've done, we will sit and talk about how we would do things differently, how we would maybe design our tent differently, or do something to our vehicle, or I don't like the shock absorbers, or I don't like the way the water is carried, or and so on and so forth. And I was thinking here, I'm going to camp here the night. What would I like right now? Hot water. That's what I'd like right now. So how can I get some hot water? Well, it's quite easy. I can put a jerry can and put it next to the fire. That's quite easy. It takes about 45 minutes if you've got a reasonable fire to warm up a jerry can to shower level. But I'd have to make a fire first and get that going, and it would take a bit of time. How about if I wanted hot water right now? 2 years ago this month, this Land Cruiser, the idea for this vehicle began. I was sitting in the Hona River all on my own. I am going to create, when I get back home from this expedition, I am going to create the perfect two-man expedition vehicle. And I had the idea of actually building the ultimate two-person overland vehicle, and this is the result of that dream. And the idea now is I'm in the Northern Cape, the roads are rough, the scenery is fantastic, the environment is exactly what this vehicle is designed for. And I thought I had to bring it here. I had to bring it somewhere where I could actually test it. I want to test it in terms of the vehicle. I want to test it in terms of the camping. How good is it? How fast can I set up camp? I want it simple, easy, efficient, and nice to live with. And that's why I'm here. And that is the ultimate in practicality and speed. So it's bigger than an ordinary rooftop tent. It takes seconds to pop up, and it takes seconds to pack away. The other day I was showing some people it was actually in a Toyota dealership, and somebody pointed out, "Is that your vehicle?" And yeah, and I explained a little bit about it, and I said, "I'll pitch the tent for you." And he said, "No, don't." And I said, "No, I'll pitch the tent for you." And he said, "No, don't," because what he had this vision of me doing this thing in the parking lot. So he said, no, you really, no, don't pitch the tent. And I just stood there and pushed. You push this much and the thing just lifts on its own. And I said, "It's done." And it's done. There's nothing more for me to do. I can go to bed. So this just kind of, And I look at that now, and I look at my Troopcarrier now, and the Troopie is a wonderful platform for this kind of thing. I can't actually think about making it better. Except to go even further. But of course, sleeping is just one part of luxury when camping. So then, of course, you get to the next stage is, well, how easy is it for me to prepare a meal? This is also part of luxury. To me, I just have a roll with all my cutlery and I hang it on the vehicle. And to me, that's perfectly sufficient. I pull out a stove and I plug it in. I don't mind pulling out a stove and plugging it in. Some like to have it already connected. Sure, that's nice to have that extra convenience, all a measure. Does wanting these things make you soft? Does it make you, anybody, a weakling because they like having some comfort? I've just matured. And the expedition we've done over the last couple of, day 7 now, in my new cruiser, I'm a new camper. Yes, we've been more comfortable than we have ever been before. We've been able to make proper toast. Toast is nice. The alternative would have been stoking up a fire, getting out a grid and making toast over the fire. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it at all. But I might like some toast this morning and I might only make the fire this evening because there's limited firewood. Then I would have just said, no, we won't have toast this morning and been perfectly happy with it. But this morning, if I want to, I can have toast. And I am going to have nice coffee instead of horrible instant. I've learned that it's more than just comfort in the physical sense of being comfortable. It's also comfort in the being comfortable in your skin. It's for a spiritual comfort when on expedition, because being on expedition, being in the wilderness, being in the middle of nowhere, is, for me anyway, a spiritual thing. And when things get in the way of our spiritualness, everyday life is one of those things that hammers. I'm not a religious person, but I am a very spiritual person. There are realms that I believe that we do not fully understand because we're unable to. It's like saying to a fish, can you imagine walking down to the shops and buying a hamburger? How's a fish going to even begin to understand what that can possibly mean? And I know these realms exist. That's where I'm coming from. And being in the wilderness, you get in touch with that easier than you can, generally speaking, in one's day-to-day life. So it's not about being comfortable physically only, it's about being comfortable with your surroundings. And that doesn't just mean a comfortable bed and an easy way of packing. It means a limit on the amount of gadgets and things that are vying for your attention, trying to make you more comfortable, when all they're actually doing is detracting from the real reason of being in the bush. And that was my mistake with the Dream Tourer, I have decided. And it's not really particularly that it's not particularly good off-road. I mean, I watch other channels with vehicles, and they drive vehicles with similar issues with this, and they drive very tough off-road conditions, and they manage. I realized I've actually been, I wouldn't say lying to myself, but it's the reason why it doesn't give me the fizz, because it detracts me from the real reason of expedition travel.
Can I have a photo with him, Dad?
So if you take anything from this video, the next time you're at a four-wheel drive store and you're looking at some kit, roll it over in your head. Would you rather spend that money on a trip, on the fuel, extra 4 or 5 unpaid days leave to do turn it over in your head Because sometimes all the stuff, we just don't need it.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe and click the notifications bell so you don't miss our weekly videos.